Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
You know, I'm going to beat him up. Was that from some movie? I haven't heard that phrase in a long time until President Trump just said it to Trey Yingst. Now, Trey's gotten a little bit better. You know, he was very kind of, we're going to be fair and balanced when it comes to the terrorists and the Israelis. You know, the Israelis say this, they wouldn't call them terrorists, right? The freedom fighters or whatever, euphemisms. Always using a euphemism. But he seems a bit more grounded now, shall we say. A couple of highlights from this interview, in addition to the one that I did the night before. It's very interesting whenever you talk to the president, everybody gets very excited. And you do too, actually. You do too. But then you realize, you know, I do this all the time. This shouldn't be a bigger deal, you know, and your head can get in the way. I think about President Trump says, if you think about it too much, you can choke. And you'll notice sometimes he shows up and it's just, you know, he doesn't seem to have any concern. And this is a positive. It's a compliment. Whether it's Trey Yingst in front of him in a chair or the UN General Assembly or, Joe Biden on the debate stage or Kamala Harris on the debate stage or Hillary Clinton, it doesn't matter. Same person no matter what. He doesn't change because of the size of the crowd or who's in the crowd or whether it's a crowd or not. In person, on the phone. I think that's something really to be emulated. You know, it's hard to replicate because most of us are not going to be in front of a crowd of, 100,000 people giving a speech or being interviewed on network TV, potentially a hostile interview on network TV. You know, when you throw anything at somebody, they're ready for anything. And that's what he is. He's ready for anything. So we're bombing the hell. We're beating them up. And we are getting closer, although we haven't engaged civilian targets over there. You know, desalinization plants, civilian infrastructure, that kind of thing. Because, we don't have a beef with the Iranian people. It would be nice if they started to kind of fix this situation on their own, if you know what I mean. Lots of countries have overthrown dictatorships and the rest. You guys could do the same thing. Granted, you don't have the weapons. And however, I think arrangements have been made in that respect, right? In that regard, we've thrown a few weapons their way. So it would be helpful. But you know what? Not necessary. If you guys are up to it, great. If you're not, oh well, we'll figure out a way. Every Supreme Court justice should be living not in the neighborhood of anywhere where there are regular people, because if you live with regular people, bad people can drive by your house and do something terrible. I'm talking about Supreme Court justices who are very, very important, the decisions, and they're targets. They are targets. Justice Kavanaugh was a target. And unfortunately, you're a target because lawmakers want you dead. You know, Chuck Schumer still should be locked up for this public threat of violence against Supreme Court Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. This is the full clip, which I've never actually watched the entire thing. And I want to do this now. You, Gorsuch! You, Kavanaugh, we're going to blow your heads up. The whirlwind. The fire. Remember that? Hit it if you don't mind. Cut 15.
Inside the walls of this court, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments, as you know, for the first major abortion right cases since Justices Kavanaugh and Justices Gorsuch came to the bench. We know what's at stake. Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. From Louisiana to Missouri to Texas, Republican legislatures are waging a war on women, all women. And they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, You have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. The bottom line is very simple. We will stand with the American people. We will stand with American women. We will tell President Trump and Senate Republicans who have stacked the court with right-wing ideologues that you're going to be gone in November and you will never be able to do what you're trying to do now ever again. You hear that over there on the far right? You're gone in November. We are here to send these folks a message, not on our watch. So let me ask you, my friends, are we going to let Republicans undo a woman's right to choose? Are we going to stay quiet as they try to turn back the clock? Are we going to give up or waver when things get tough? No, we're going to stand together in one voice and take a stand on behalf of women and families throughout the country. We're going to stand against all these attempts to restrict a woman's right to choose, and we will win.
Whoa. Well, there were 2 or 3 federal crimes that occurred there. That was a threat. That was an absolute threat against a sitting Supreme Court justice. You ain't allowed to do that. And then he got very, very dark about, what's going to happen to us. The far right. You got that, the far right. If you're going to get President Trump for chewing gum, you can get Chuck Schumer on that. Led to such a situation where Supreme Court justices can legally be harassed wherever they go. But that's against the law. Remember KJP, Karine Jean-Pierre, possibly one of the most ignorant people to ever enter a White House. And I'm talking about, including people who took a tour of the White House, right? I mean, anybody who's ever been in the White House, I think she is the dumbest. And through a confluence, a comedy of errors, you might say, or comedy of cultural blunders, she was the only one viewed as qualified for that job. Now, why is that? Oh, I remember. She is a black, gay, ignorant woman. No, a black, gay. Well, she is a black, gay, ignorant woman, but she was a black, gay, immigrant woman. That was it. Black and gay. And I thought she was using that job. She talked about being lesbian so much that I really thought she was using the podium to meet girls, putting it out there a lot. Way too much. And then any show she would go on. I mean, what was her? I mean, sex was on her mind a lot. All right. Karine Jean-Pierre saying it's A-OK to basically riot in front of a Supreme Court justice's house or get in their faces in a restaurant. Cut 13.
Where's the line? If these protesters can go to a justice's house and they can go to a restaurant, where is it that you don't think it's appropriate for a group of protesters to go?
I just laid out, you asked me about intimidation. We condemn intimidation. We condemn any violence. And we've been very clear. It is a clear definition of what violence is or what intimidation is. Peaceful protest, people should be allowed to be able to do that.
In a restaurant?
If it's outside of a restaurant, if it's peaceful, for sure.
Really?
Peaceful protest. Your first question to me was intimidation.
So these justices, because protesters do not agree with an opinion that they signed on to, have no right to privacy, is what you're saying.
But Peter, this is people have the right to, this is what a democracy is. People have the right
to privacy?
Of course, people have a right to privacy, but people also have a right to be able to protest peacefully.
So, peacefully, that does not mean taking over a street and parading in front of a Supreme Court justice's house. It's specifically, there's a statute that says you can't do that. Now, it goes out the window. It ain't peacefully. It ain't peaceful when you take over streets. And that's the thing. They pretended that Black Lives Matter was peaceful. But by definition, it wasn't. The moment you step off the sidewalk and take over a street, they didn't get permits for any of that stuff. peaceably assemble. First Amendment right to peaceably assemble. Is your right to peaceably assemble? Like, you can peaceably assemble, but if you get in my way on the street. Anyway, poor Justice Kavanaugh, they almost killed him over this stuff. And Amy Coney Barrett is like biting her nails every step of the way. Amy Coney Barrett is not cut out for the Supreme Court. Just listen. Cut 11. Yes, sir.
I thought I would just share a little bit about how the threats have affected me and my family personally. They have required me to, or my children, to think about and see things that children should not have to see or think about. One example is when threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago, around the time of the Dobbs leak. My security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and he wanted to know what it was and why I had it. And I didn't know how to respond because maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one.
Stop. All right, she's being a little melodramatic. When I was 12 years, any kid knows what a bulletproof vest is. By the time you're 7, has he watched a cop show, for crying out loud? I was watching SWAT, the cool one, in 1976. Diddle-in, 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 diddle-in. Remember that theme song? It was so cool. And they all wore bulletproof vests. Kids are fascinated by bulletproof vests. You mean it stops a bullet? Anyway, this is her. They want more money for security. I'm all for that. They want more security. They want more officers to guard them. I'm all for that. But I'm also for you got to be tough. And I'm not sure where this sob story just gives me insight into why she's become wishy-washy on the court, why she gives Trump those long, dirty looks, and she probably doesn't have enough security. I say put them on Fort Myer or Fort McNair or Fort Belvoir. These are big military bases in the Washington, D.C. area. They have wonderful housing. Wonderful housing, places to live, and put them there, right? No one's going to mess. No, very hard to get onto a military base. Not impossible, though, with the drones. All right, something else we got to worry about. I want to, when we come back, we'll go to the hearings on Capitol Hill. Not always the most exciting thing, I grant you, but watching Todd Blanche, who is the nominee for the Attorney General, and having seen that man in that crummy courtroom downtown as a defense attorney and President Trump as a defendant and Emil Bove as another defense attorney, and seeing where those guys are now, the President of the United States, the Attorney General nominee, and a federal appellate court judge. It's just beautiful, and they never dreamt it was going to happen. They thought the moment they mentioned Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen and his checks and all that crap, that we were going to wet our pants and freak out and vote for Joe Biden. You know, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. Isn't that what they said? Fat, dumb, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life. They just don't understand us, do they? All right. 800-848-9222. 800-848-9222. We'll be right back.